Eastern Buddhism is so called because it is the majority religion in China and Japan and Korea, that is, in East Asia. It's also called Mahayana Buddhism. As we saw in the last segment, Theravada Buddhism is very individualistic. One is master of one's own fate. It's up to you to fight for your own liberation, and you have to pursue that liberation in a rather solitary manner through a long course of discipline, although you do that in a monastic context. And being monk-centered allows less for the layperson to do. You can make merit and you can help out the Sangha, but it seems that the monastics are doing the really important work, and only the monastics are anywhere close to getting the cure in Theravada. You see these individualistic and monastic emphases in most of the texts in the Pali Canon, but those were not to be the only texts. Somewhere around 100 BCE, there started to pop up new sutras, and they weren't in Pali, they were in Sanskrit, which at the time was a prestigious Indian language. And these new sutras purported to be discourses of the Buddha that were newly found. Why were they newly found? We'll get to that in a minute. New sutras continued to have been written up until at least the year 400 Common Era, maybe a little bit past that, but most of the major Mahayana sutras were written before 400 Common Era. They're called Mahayana Sutras because they're only accepted as scripture in Eastern Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism. Now, on the face of it, these seem like they just can't be genuine. Who could have been hiding these books for hundreds of years? All of a sudden, in a different language, now supposedly you have rediscovered these lost texts. But it's not the language and the time of disappearance that's really the issue. The real issue is there's a huge difference in content between these and the sutras in the Pali Canon, which we'll talk about. Even though they start off, "Thus have I heard," they just are a very different genre. A leading British scholar of Mahayana named Paul Williams argues that Mahayana was a conservative school that was initially led by ascetic forest dwellers and other monks. And he theorizes that these new sutras weren't forged by dishonest people, but rather that they were written down as a result of recollection of the Buddha meditation. This is a meditation technique in which you actively visualize and imagine being with the Buddha, hearing his teaching face to face. And he supposes that monks who actively, over a long course, cultivated this may have come to believe that they were actually receiving new teachings from the still existing Buddha. We do know that this type of meditation was widely practiced in this era, and that the Buddha was widely believed to be present and in some sense available in his relics, which have been distributed to many stupas and monasteries and temples. Whether that's right or not, what's clear is that in the Mahayana scriptures, there is really a new vision for Buddhism. And the old kind of Buddhism, Theravada, is critiqued as narrow and helpful to a few, maybe even selfish. So very slowly, maybe picking up steam during the 100s Common Era, and probably in monasteries, this movement grows. There come to be more and more of these sutras, and they come to be more widely accepted. Here's a quick look at their teachings. A defining mark of early Mahayana sutras is their focus on a certain intention, which is called Bodhichitta. What it means is to form the intention and to take the vow to become a Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva is one who is to become a Buddha to be. A Bodhisattva, instead of selfishly going off to their own nirvana, delays their own nirvana in order to help others get there. They want to be the last one in the door. Now this is a very different religious goal than merely escaping from samsara. This teaching also led to the creation of what scholars call the Mahayana pantheon. They don't call it that. They don't call this a collection of gods. In the view of Buddhism, the gods too are in need of help, and gods haven't got the cure yet. But celestial bodhisattvas are these mighty beings that are almost Buddhas, and they're available to us. You can pray to them. You can call upon their aid. And there are also many Buddhas available to us. And these are worshipped by images, by idols, just as in Hinduism. Arhat or Arahant, literally worthy one, is now viewed as a lower achievement. So this is part of the Mahayana critique of Theravada. It aims for a lesser goal. And according to them, at one stage in his lifetimes, Gautama decided to shoot for something higher. The old way, the Theravada way, is critiqued as Hinayana, which means a lesser vehicle. In other words, a lesser means of salvation, whereas the Mahayana is the greater vehicle, or the great vehicle. Hinayana then has a lesser goal that's really not the best goal. It also is lesser in the sense that it is helpful to fewer people. Being a monk or a nun is great, but most of us can't be monks or nuns. Now here's the part that really surprised me, the doctrine of expedient means. This explains the difference in the message between the sutras and the Pali Canon and these new Mahayana sutras. Why would the Buddha go around teaching a lesser message, a message that's clearly inferior in many ways to the Mahayana message? The answer is expedient means that a wise teacher adapts his message to his hearers. In those days, the world really just wasn't ready for the full message. But now the world is ready. Now the full message can be told. To put it bluntly, in the old days a lie was being told, but it was a helpful lie. It was the best that we could hear. Another way that Mahayana is supposed to be superior to Hinayana is that it supplies people with easier means to getting the cure. So it opens the way to liberation to the masses at large, and not just to liberation, but to Buddhahood. And they can get that liberation, they can get that cure without necessarily becoming a monastic. So maybe you can get there by saying a mantra. Maybe you can read a certain book or teach it to others or make copies of it. Maybe that will get you so much merit that you'll become enlightened very quickly, that this will be your last birth. Maybe you can be personally devoted to some Buddha or Bodhisattva. Maybe that being will help you out. Maybe they can transfer their merit to you. Maybe you just need to approach a certain book or a certain statue and honor it, and that will transfer merit to your account. Or maybe all you really need is some simple insight, some piece of wisdom about reality. If you can just get that, the door will be thrown open to you. Whichever of these are taught, whichever mix of these is taught, the point is that you don't have to go through the grueling existence of a monk or nun. And even if you are going to become a monastic, still, the idea is that you have better means than were previously available. In the next segment, we'll look at two important subgroups of Eastern Buddhism.